It was a cold night in a quiet town. Most families were asleep, windows shut tight, curtains drawn against the wind. But on the front step of a small church, a baby lay crying, wrapped in nothing but a thin, old cloth. The child's voice cut through the night, like a desperate call for love. No one knew who left the baby there. Some whispered that it was a poor young mother who could not feed her child. Others said it was a secret shame hidden away in the dark. But whatever the reason, the baby was alone, unwanted, and helpless. The next morning, the church bell rang as always. People came for prayers, but what they found shocked them. Right at the heavy wooden door lay the baby, his tiny fists shaking in the cold. His cries were weak, but they carried a strong message. He wanted to live. Pastor John, the old church leader, bent down and picked him up. "Oh Lord," he whispered, "this is a child you have sent to us. But who will care for him?" The townspeople gathered around, staring at the baby as though he were a problem nobody wished to solve. "He is not mine," one woman said. "I already have 5 children to feed," another added. "I can't take in a child who isn't mine," a man grumbled. The crowd grew silent. The baby had no name, no family, and no one willing to claim him. He was the child nobody wanted. For days, Pastor John tried to find someone willing to take the baby home. He knocked on doors, begged families, and pleaded with kind-looking strangers. But everywhere he went, the answer was the same: no. Finally, he decided to keep the baby in the church for a while. He fed him goat's milk with a small cloth and wrapped him in blankets given by kind women who pitied the child, but would not take him. As days turned into weeks, the baby grew stronger. He had bright eyes that seemed to search for love. The children who came to Sunday school gave him a name. "Let's call him David," a little girl suggested. Because in the Bible, David was small, but he became great. Everyone agreed. So the child nobody wanted was now David, but his life was far from easy.
David was now 12 years old. He had grown tall and thin with bright eyes that carried both sadness and determination. The church had been his home all his life, and Pastor John had been his only family. But things were changing. Pastor John was getting weaker with each passing year. His hair had turned completely white, and his hands shook when he tried to lift heavy things. David loved him deeply, but he worried every day about what would happen when the old man was gone. At school, life was no easier. Children still whispered about him. "He's the boy who was left at the church door," one said. "No one wanted him. Even his mother ran away," another added. The words burned like fire in David's heart. He tried to ignore them, but sometimes the pain was too heavy. He wondered why children with parents laughed more easily, dressed better, and walked with pride. He wanted to belong, but the shadow of his past followed him everywhere. Despite the pain, David was different from other children in one way. He worked harder than anyone else. He studied his books with great care, often staying up late at night with a candle reading and writing while the other boys played. "If I don't have parents to fight for me," he told himself, "then I must fight for myself." His teachers noticed. One day, Mrs. Taylor, his school teacher, stopped him after class. "David," she said softly, "you are one of the brightest children I have ever taught. Don't let the cruel words of others break your spirit. One day you will rise higher than all of them." David carried those words in his heart like a secret treasure. Whenever he felt weak, he remembered them. But life grew even harder when Pastor John fell ill. David was only 14 when he began caring for the old man, cooking small meals, fetching water, and cleaning the church. He became both a child and a caregiver, forced to grow up before his time. One night, Pastor John called him close. His voice was weak, but his eyes were kind. And so David moved into Mrs. Taylor's small house. She had no children of her own, but she gave him food, a bed, and encouragement. Still, David never forgot that he was living on kindness, not on family love. At school, he continued to shine. He won prizes in writing and mathematics, yet some children still laughed at him, calling him the unwanted one. But now David no longer ran away in tears. Instead, he worked harder. "I will prove to them that I am more than what they say," he thought. As days turned into weeks, David immersed himself in his studies, discovering the joy of knowledge and the power of perseverance. He spent hours in the library, losing himself in stories of heroes and dreamers. Finally, the day came when he stood before his classmates, trophy in hand, proving to everyone that he was indeed more than just the unwanted one. The applause echoed in his ears, and for the first time he felt a sense of belonging not only to Mrs. Taylor, but to a world that had once seemed so cruel. When he turned 16, something happened that would change the direction of his life. A big scholarship examination was announced. The winner would get free education at a prestigious school in the city. Many children applied, but only the brightest would succeed. David saw this as his chance. "If I win this," he told himself, "I can escape this town. I can build a future. I can show the world that even the child nobody wanted can become somebody. Every night he studied until his eyes grew heavy. Mrs. Taylor supported him, often bringing him tea and saying, "Keep going, David. I believe in you." The day of the exam came. David sat in the hall with hundreds of other children. Fear whispered in his mind, but hope shouted louder. He remembered Pastor John's words, "Keep walking, keep studying, keep believing." Weeks later, the results were announced. David's name was at the top of the list. He had won the scholarship. The news spread through the town. Some were shocked. Others were proud. Even those who once called him the unwanted one now whispered in amazement. The city was bigger and louder than anything David had ever known. Tall buildings rose like giants. Cars rushed through the streets and crowds of people moved in every direction. For a boy who had grown up in a quiet town and lived most of his life in a small church, the city felt like another world. David began his studies at the prestigious school. Everything was different here. The classrooms were larger, the teachers stricter, and the students richer. Most of his classmates wore fine clothes, carried expensive bags, and spoke with confidence. David, on the other hand, owned only 2 sets of second-hand uniforms and a pair of worn-out shoes. At first, some students laughed at him. "Look at his shoes," one whispered. "He doesn't belong here," another said. But David had faced such words all his life, and now they no longer broke him. Instead, he worked harder than anyone else, determined to prove that he was worthy of being there. Slowly, his hard work began to shine. He topped every test, asked the sharpest questions in class, and impressed the teachers with his discipline. His classmates who once mocked him started to respect him. Some even came to him for help with their studies. Still, when he was alone at night, David thought about his past. He often sat by the window of his small dormitory room, looking out at the city lights, and whispered to himself, "One day I will know who I am. I will know why I was abandoned." Years passed quickly. David finished high school with top grades and earned another scholarship to study medicine at the university. He had always been drawn to helping people, perhaps because he knew the pain of being helpless. Becoming a doctor became his dream, not only to heal bodies, but also to heal hearts. At the university, David grew into a strong, confident young man. He worked part-time jobs to support himself, washing dishes in restaurants, carrying boxes in warehouses, and tutoring younger students. Life was never easy, but his determination was stronger than every obstacle. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while volunteering at a hospital, David met an older woman who was weak. Years later, David fulfilled his dream of becoming a doctor. People in the city and beyond came to know him not only for his skill, but also for his kindness. He treated rich and poor alike, often giving free care to those who had nothing. When asked why he was so generous, he would smile and say, "Because once I was a child, nobody wanted, and I know how it feels to be forgotten." David built a new life, but he never forgot his beginnings. He visited the little town, often helping the poor, repairing the old church, and honoring the memory of Pastor John, the man who first picked him up from the cold ground and told him he was wanted by God. The boy who had been abandoned on a church doorstep had become a man respected by all. He had turned rejection into strength, loneliness into purpose, and pain into healing. David's life became a testimony that even the child nobody wanted can rise, can shine, and can become somebody.